Welcome, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of North Orange County and the City of Fullerton, I want to thank you for watching our candidate forum for the Fullerton City Council. My name is Jody Balma, and in addition to being a part of the League of Women Voters, I'm a professor of political science at Fullerton College, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. We have two volunteers helping with timekeeping and keeping us on track, so thank you. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. Our goal for tonight is to allow each candidate to communicate their platform and vision for representing the City of Fullerton and allow the community to ask questions which have been emailed in, all while maintaining civil discourse. This is not a debate, and we won't see the candidates interacting with one another, but communicating with you. Before the event, we had the candidates draw slots for where to sit, and we've arranged them by district. And I want to take just a quick minute to explain district-based elections since Fullerton's still transitioning, and this is a relatively new way of voting for Fullerton. In the past, voters would have been asked to vote for all 8 of the candidates to choose 3. We've now divided the city into 5 geographic districts, and 3 of those districts are on the ballot this year, 1, 2, and 4. And 3 and 5 will be on the ballot in 2022. So if you live in District 1, 2, or 4, you'll only see one of these races and you'll be voting for one candidate. If you live in District 3 or 5, you won't see any candidates on your ballot this year and you'll have to wait until 2022 to vote for your council seat. However, once elected, the board will be making decisions for the entire school board. For the entire city council. So it's good for the entire community to watch. I'll be introducing the candidates in just a second and having them give their opening statements. But I want to thank each of the candidates for being here tonight, as well as for running for office. In light of our polarized politics, I think it's important to remember that these candidates are our neighbors and our friends who are volunteering to put themselves into the public sphere, where they're often attacked and criticized. They understand this and they run anyway, sometimes at great personal cost in terms of fundraising, time spent at events and forums like this, and then once elected in doing their job and making the best decisions possible. It's far too easy to demonize our opponents instead of just disagreeing with them. So I thank you sincerely for running for office. Questions were submitted by email, and we'll try our best to get to as many as possible, but we had far too many to fit into a 90-minute forum. So if we don't get to a question that was submitted, please know we're not censoring the questions or protecting the candidates from tough questions. We just want to remove duplicate questions, any personal attacks, prioritize the most relevant and most asked questions, and give the candidates time to answer as many as possible. So we're going to do our best to get to as many as possible. To make sure that happens, we'll have timekeepers to keep everyone on track. The audience will want to hear as many answers as possible. You'll each have 2 minutes for an opening statement that should include your background and qualifications as well as why you want to run for office. Then we'll ask those questions in rotating order. If a question is for a specific candidate, I'll wait until it's that candidate's turn to ask. And if it's appropriate, all of you will have the chance to respond as well. If it's a general question to all, I'll start with the next candidate and rotate through. And then at the end, I'll reserve about 10 minutes at the end for you to do 1-minute closing statements, and we'll just go in order of wherever that rotation has stopped. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our candidates for Fullerton City Council. With us tonight for District 1, we only have one of the 2 candidates with us, but because it's not a debate and it is a forum, we will have him answer the questions just like the rest of the candidates. So Fred Zhang is here with us. In District 2, we have 4 candidates running: Nick Dunlap, Charles Sargent, Mackenzie Chang, and Dr. Faisal Kazi. And in District 4, we have Aruni Thacker and Bruce Whitaker. So we'll start in District 1 with Fred Zhang and the opening statements.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Ms. Palma. And I want to thank all the viewers that are tuning in tonight. I'm running for City Council to represent all the residents of Fullerton. My experience as a small business owner empowers me to focus on fiscal management, help businesses in Fullerton to reopen and build back better, increase the quality of life standards for Fullerton residents. My experience as a nonprofit director qualifies me to prioritize repairing our aging roads, restoring trust and faith in local leadership, help the most vulnerable in our city, like our children and our seniors. My goals as a city council member are to better involve our community and have local government be more accountable and transparent, to maintain a high standard of city services for our residents, to help build positive consensus on the council so we can move our city forward. I look very forward to listening to all of you, educating myself on your concerns, gaining your faith, and earning your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Dunlap, District 2.
Good evening. I'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this great program. My name is Nick Dunlap. I'm a third-generation Fullerton resident, born and raised here in town. Grew up playing basketball at the Boys and Girls Club and attended Fullerton schools before graduating from UCLA. Today, I live here with my wife Bianca and my 2 little girls, and we're active in a number of groups and organizations across the community because we believe that Fullerton is a great place to be. But, Fullerton's not without its challenges, and we've got some real issues facing us today. For one, we've got a $12 million budget deficit and a $6 million unfunded pension liability. And we've kicked the can on these issues for too long, and it's time that we address them today. We've got the worst rated roads and streets in all of Orange County, according to OCTA, but for those of us who live here, we don't need a survey to tell us that. We just need to work together to fix our roads. And public safety also remains a top concern. As a lifelong Fullertonian and someone with deep ties to the community, believe me, no one will work harder for you than I will as your District 2 council member. Thank you.
Good. I get another candidate from District 2, Charles Sargent.
Well, thank you for having me this evening. It's good to be back again. First, I want to start out, I too am a lifelong resident of Fullerton, raised here. I've been in District 2 for over 40 years. Went to all Ford School, Wilshire Junior High School, Fullerton High School, and Fullerton College. District 2 has been my home for over 40 years, so I take a personal interest in representing them. And when I thought about running for council, I thought, well, what can I really do? I don't want to just run and sit up there and go to 2 meetings and not do anything for the public. So I sat down. For the last 4 years, I've sat down and tried to figure out how we can better things and do things better. And I've come up with many business plans for the homeless, for our financial stability downtown, rebuilding our marketing corridor, bringing in some major businesses that are focused on the most tax base we can receive out of a business, actually targeting. I take it very personal when it comes to District 2 because this is my family and my friends that still live here from grade school. Since 1973, I remember walking to Laguna Lake as a kid every day to fish, stopping at Kentucky Fried Chicken, getting something to eat on the way, and shopping at the market on Valencia Mesa, and later go to the ice cream shop and get ice cream. We've lost a lot of things up in Sunny Hills. We had some beautiful things up in Sunny Hills that the business has dissipated, and it's gone. And I miss that, and I think we can get that back, and I'm the right person to do that because I not only have the time, but I do have the 22-year successful background as president and CFO of my corporation. I employ over 25 families. I sign the check on the front, not the back, and I will do the same thing for the citizens, and I will stand up for my district, and I work every day, 7 days a week, no matter how many hours it takes. You can count on me. You can depend on me. I'm completely on their side of the residents, 100%. I ask you to vote for me. Thank you.
Mackenzie Chang, District 2.
Hi, I also want to thank the League of Women Voters. I'm actually not old enough to have, I wasn't alive when the last time the League of Women Voters ran the presidential debates. And so I'm actually really grateful that such an organization has stuck around and continued to support local and state elections in a nonpartisan way and really kind of force issues to come to the table. And that's why I'm running. I want issues to be discussed by the candidates. I want there not to be false promises. I want to listen to the community and do as much research as I can, as I'm happy that all the other candidates seem so informed and passionate about what we're doing here. I also kind of have a different campaign to everyone else. This might be the first time you're seeing my name or hearing me speak, I haven't spent any money other than putting my name on the ballot on the campaign. And I'm kind of running as a concerned citizen to better understand and better improve the quality of our governance in the city. My background is working in government, and I'd be the first one to say that governments run really inefficiently. And growing up, that's probably the first thing I learned. And I've worked with the State Department and the Peace Corps and found great teams there to work with and learned how to understand what it takes to make government become more efficient, work better for the people that they're trying to serve. And those are the kinds of qualifications that I would bring to the City Council. So I thank the League again and the other candidates who are here. I hope we have a good forum today. Thank you.
Thank you. And our fourth candidate for District 2, Dr. Faisal Kazi.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for this forum and for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Faisal Kazi. I'm a neurologist. I'm active at St. Jude Hospital. I'm a business owner of a group medical practice. I'm founder of a nonprofit. I'm a community servant. I'm a husband, and I'm a father of 4. 2 of them are former foster youth, and 1 currently placed with us in the foster care system. When we adopted our kids, they could barely speak. And today, with the help and love of our neighbors, of the teachers, of their coaches, and this community, they're flourishing. It is precisely for this reason I've decided to run for council to ensure a bright and safe future for all of us, beginning with a focus on our roads and infrastructure and water main repairs, heavily focusing on the success and ensuring that our businesses thrive, and maintaining the public health and safety of our elderly and our adolescents alike. When I graduated from medical school, my father took me to the side and said, "There's no success in you unless and until people around you benefit from your work." And that mantra became the purpose and mission of my life. And in line with that, my work and my dedication as your councilman will be committed to uplifting our community together. Thank you.
Thank you. Aruni Thakur, District 4.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. My name is Aruni Thakur, and I'm running for City Council in District 4, where I was raised and where my wife and I currently own a home 3 blocks away from where my parents still live. I attended local schools and met my wife at Sunny Hills High School. We're both practicing attorneys, and my wife's business is located here in Fullerton. In my legal practice, I defend large and small businesses in workers' compensation cases. My last semester of law school, I worked in Sacramento in a state legislator's office, analyzing and writing legislation. Since then, my work and public life have been a sort of love letter to our great city. I've served on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and before that, I served on the Energy Resources Management Commission. When I was on ERMC, I saw how important it is to keep our eyes on our city's finances. I was elected to the Fullerton School District in 2018, but I first ran in 2010. Losing that 2010 race taught me a great deal about humility. Besides being passionate about education in the district that my sons currently are being educated in, I did 2 things on the school board that I'm very proud of. I helped to add caring for our students' mental health to our district goals, and I also helped to add teaching our students to be active citizens in our democracy to our district goals. But what I'm really most proud of is on difficult issues, my colleagues and I, my fellow school board members, were able to compromise, even if on one issue it took 3 meetings. During this campaign, I've heard from so many voters in District 4, of course they want to talk about homelessness, our infrastructure, and a way forward out of our city's financial problems. Though there's no agreement on how to do that, even voters who don't care too much about what happens at City Hall, just want someone who will show up in the community, listen to them, and who will act with compassion, empathy, creativity, and without cynicism. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Whitaker, District 4.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League as well for each election cycle hosting issues-oriented events the way that you do. You know, my wife Linda and I have lived in Southwest Fullerton for 32 years together. She actually has lived there even longer, her entire life. Went to schools there as well, Pacific Drive, Nicholas Junior High, and Sunny Hills High. We are concerned about the current conditions in the city. They've been allowed to really, a certain atrophy has set in the city. And I've been a member of the council, and so many poor decisions and bad policies over many years have left the city in a really subpar condition. Now, I'd like to talk about, you know, the future and about how we can remedy and correct these things. But I believe that something important needs to happen first. You can't just throw money at these problems and expect to solve some of the core issues in our city. We really do need fundamental reform. I know as an activist, even 25 years ago, and then later when the pension spikes happened, that I had accurately predicted the financial mess that we find ourselves in now. And we do need better hands on the wheel to make a difference. The most important quality in a council member is to understand who you work for. And I've always understood that I work for the residents of the city, for businesses, especially small businesses, employers, families, students, and visitors to our city as well. And to understand that's the side that we're working for, and to try to get the best reasonable cost municipal services and to have a clean, safe city is really the goal.
Thank you. Our final candidate representing District 1, Andrew Cho, for a biography statement for opening statement for 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. This is my first time running for any elected office. I've spent the past 17 years raising my 3 kids. My daughter graduated from Sunny Hills this past year, and she's a freshman now at Hillsdale College. I've been a Fullerton resident since 1979. I went to Laguna Road Elementary. I went on to Parks. I have 2 brothers that attended Sunny Hills, and currently I have an 8th grader at Parks and an 11th grader at Sunny Hills. I've focused the past 17 years being a parent concerned really about the neighborhood in which I live, and really the economy and the politics of my own family. I take my role as a father very seriously. The issues that face the city today have been issues for many decades. And I would concur with Mr. Whitaker on a lot of the fundamental reforms that I believe he would propose. A lot of the issues I'm open to hearing common sense solutions. I'm open to forming final opinions upon formal hearings and having the access to data and evidence that a council member would need to make a final decision. The skill sets that I bring to the position, I'm a bankruptcy attorney. I help businesses and individuals avoid bankruptcy, restructure their debt, and I have a master's degree in public health. I believe I could provide a fair and accurate assessment of reliable and up-to-date data to help the city recover from the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you. So now we'll rotate the questions. So the first question will go to Nick Dunlap. What do you see as Fullerton's greatest challenge, and how would you address it as a member of the City Council? Each have 1 minute to answer the question, and we'll start with Mr. Dunlap.
Thanks. This is an easy question. It's our roads and streets, and I mean clearly you can't get from point A to point B anywhere in town without encountering some kind of bump, pothole, alligatoring or other. And so simply put, I think what we need to do is, 1, address the current spending issues so that we can find money in our existing budget and allocate that funding to fix our roads and streets. I think we need to be more aggressive in applying for county and state funding that will help us with those resources as well. So I think those are some of the things that we can do immediately right now, today, in lieu of and instead of going to taxpayers and asking for a tax increase to do that. I don't believe that's the right way to solve that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sargent?
I also agree the streets are a main reason why we're here today running in District 4. Our neighbors have been complaining for a long time, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. That is my campaign slogan, is streets. That's why I'm here. But I believe one thing I got to say tonight to the voters and to the residents that I've sat with, this is a pretty simple problem. We need money. I don't care how you cut it up and you explain it, whether it's funds you get in bonds or you borrow it or you find it or you go in our budget and look for it. We need money, and we need someone who knows how to make money. That means bringing new businesses into Fullerton. That means generating major tax-based businesses that will come in and bring us up quickly. I think it'll take 2 years, but I think we can do it, and we do not need to raise taxes on people. This is the wrong time, and that's one thing I don't agree with whatsoever. This seems like this is the year of the taxes, whether it's 15 or S or any other tax. It's just not working. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chang?
Thank you. I think a lot of what my fellow candidates bring up are symptoms of the problem, which is the council's inability to continue to generate revenue and not fall into a deficit. So there's definitely these symptoms, and we have to look at the source. And the issue is our spending. How are we spending money? Where are we spending money? Why are we spending money? And that's definitely our greatest challenge. Is not that there are bad roads is the symptom of the big challenges which are stemming from the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi?
Thank you for the question. I do also contend that the roads and our infrastructure at large is probably and likely the most important issue on the minds of our residents, not just because of crumbling roads in themselves that we witness on a day-to-day basis, but because the fixing and repairing those structures are so critical for a thriving economy and any conversation on further development. Everything depends on what these structures can sustain. So this is the most critical question of our period at this time. This will determine how we go forward. There are myriad of ways you can obtain funding. We can do economic feasibility studies. We can find creative ways to develop matching grants and go get those OCTA or state housing or state funds. There are other options. Taxation is one, as everybody knows. We all know here that when ANRAC committee proposed the 0.5% tax, that was in the interest of actually focusing on infrastructure only. That's where the tax conversation began. Thank you.
Mr. Tacker?
I think the main issue definitely is our city's precarious financial situation. 3 people that are sitting here right now are going to be faced with, I think, very difficult decisions. But the first people that will be able to make a decision are the voters. On November 3rd, Measure S is before the people of Fullerton. Unfortunately, it is general tax, but I'm committed to, if it passes and I prevail on November 3rd, to committing a significant chunk of that money toward infrastructure, which is definitely a symptom of our current problems. We are a city. City council members, however, will now be coming from districts. And I have to say that in the 4th district, the voters that I've spoken to and the residents that I've spoken to are very concerned about where their next paycheck is going to be coming from and what effect that is going to have on their housing situation. So citywide finances, District 4, definitely housing and voters' concerns about that.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker?
The other candidates have accurately identified streets and infrastructure as being the really big problem, the big issue right now. But the city administration and the council majority's efforts to solve that rely on fundraising, new funds, taking more and more value from the private economy, people who are struggling right now during this pandemic. It's really the wrong solution. What we need to do is get more mileage out of existing funds. We need to have balanced budgets that show the right priorities, and we need council members that are going to work hard to make sure that City Hall is working to fix problems and not fundraise. So defeating Measure S is a very important point to be had here, because that's where real reform begins, is when we defeat that sales tax measure.
Thank you. Mr. Cho?
From my purview, the biggest issue is in 2025, when the reserves for Fullerton's budget are depleted and the city's in a situation where it must avert an insolvency proceeding. The roads, definitely, District 1 residents I'm talking to, many of them are very concerned about fixing the roads. But the largest issue, I'm hearing some residents tell me who've been in Fullerton much longer than I have been, feel that this is a train wreck that we're on, and we're at the tail end of that train wreck in 2025. So finding ways to increase the revenues is top priority for me. Creative ways, out-of-the-box thinking, we've got to raise the revenues for Fullerton.
Mr. John?
There are plenty of long-term concerns that need to be addressed that most of these candidates have already mentioned. I think what we forget is what's in front of us and what we experience daily. We're all wearing masks, social distancing. There's a reason for that. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. I think that and the recovery from that has to take paramount over anything else that is possibly in discussion right now. We have citizens that are dying. We have citizens that are sick. We have citizens that cannot go to school because of this global pandemic. So I don't care where we are in the country, in particular in Fullerton. We have to address the health concern. We have to assist our citizens who are risking eviction or foreclosure, find jobs, find revenue. But first, we must deal with the health pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question will start with Mr. Sargent. How would you increase community engagement and ensure that the community has an opportunity to be heard and participate in city events and discussions?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. How would you increase community engagement and ensure that the community has an opportunity to be heard and to participate in city events and decisions?
Well, I think that I've spoke about oversight before, how we need to get the residents involved in all our decision-making on council, how they need to be present so they can voice their opinions and give them more than 3 minutes to talk to us. I'm very against that. I think that's one of our major problems, is how we orchestrate our city council meetings. And if I get to council, I will try to restructure that. I don't like the fact that a resident, and this keeps our residents quiet, kind of makes them not be able to tell us what's going on. Because when you give somebody 3 minutes, that's not enough time to explain. And then at the end of that comment, they'll tell you, thank you for your comment, and you're done. So I think that's one thing we need to do, is restructure the way we listen to our people. And that would be a tremendous improvement for a lot of people. I'm sure they'd vote for that.
Thank you. Mr. Chang?
I think here's an area where I have a lot of expertise. I've been able to do a lot of work with community groups. A lot of what made me passionate about charity and giving back to the community was getting to work with small refugee organizations that are helping people resettle in the U.S., as well as my Peace Corps service in Ukraine, and working with children there and teaching English and doing small projects with them. Really, in terms of community engagement, the best thing a person can do that's in the government or in any position of power is to engage the people that probably don't necessarily want to engage with the government, because it's not normally a thing that people like to do. And that's, for me, a big positive, is with younger people, working with, I got to work with the program that I was with, TIA. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Dr. Kazi?
A few years ago, when I was on the Citizens Community Development Commission, we had one discussion about whether we can accept an email comment from one of the residents legally accepted into the discussion. And that was interesting. This was a few years ago. Now we live in the Zoom world, right? All of our kids are in front of Zoom. I'm having to actually diagnose strokes, multiple sclerosis, and dementia patients on telemedicine, we had to shift into that gear overnight, literally. March 1st was a problem. By March 15th, we had to have it go. It would have taken us 5 more years to develop that structure. I think the engagement on part of our citizens does not have to be that an 87-year-old individual has to come in every city council meeting and has to speak to the council members. Technology is there for us to be able to receive, legally accept, and entertain these questions via email, in writing, or perhaps participation of our residents directly live via Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tacker.
I think what we're witnessing tonight with district elections across 3 different areas of the city has been a very important way to bring city government back to local neighborhoods. So I am obviously in support of districts, and I think that we will see greater engagement through this process. The other part that I think that the city has done well, and which most cities do, is the ability of council members to make committee appointments. And what you get then is representation in the community at lower levels. What I'm looking forward to after November 3rd is seeing greater participation directly from residents of District 4 being on city commissions. Hopefully I'll be able to make those appointments myself, but if not, just seeing greater participation that way. Thanks.
Mr. Whitaker.
I'm a big believer in participation and allowing citizens to have their say. After all, they're our bosses. They're the bosses of everyone at City Hall and also of the City Council. As an activist 25 years ago, I played a key role in making sure that council meetings were videotaped and stored. And I think we have a great advantage now as citizens to be able to look back and judge the actions of our council members. I've very long advocated for allowing and inviting people to come and speak to the council to bring their concerns. Many times residents have felt that council members have barked at them, have really provided derision and kind of put down those who are bringing legitimate concerns for themselves to the council. See, there's something clearly wrong. There's something wrong in the culture if that persists. And I'd like to serve on a council with other council members who have adequate respect for the public they serve.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
I think the role of a committee council member is to, it's incumbent upon all of whoever makes it to the council this year, reach out to their constituents. We're now in districts. It's more feasible to do forums, to do focus groups, to reach out personally. I myself will be committed to meeting with, having open hours in my own neighborhood at a Starbucks and reaching out to folks that way, and continue to knock on doors and reach out for opinions and input for folks who are very busy with their own lives, trying to make the house payment, trying to stay afloat. It's important for council members to reach out personally to their own constituents.
Thank you. Mr. Jung.
You know, there's something that as a football coach, I coach up my teams and say there's things that you can control, things that you can't. And 2 things that you can always control are your attitude and your effort. So the attitude of City Council has been unresponsive to the public, perhaps even disdain for the public. You watch these City Council meetings and public comes, says what they need to say. And it's not easy for residents to come and speak to council. It's not within their wheelhouse to do. I would build upon successful programs we have now. As a council member, I'd hold regular town halls and listen and learn from our neighbors. I would support any initiative to engage residents that speak Korean and Spanish and promote transparency in city government. The public needs to be engaged with city issues and help their neighbors understand the city and its available services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlap.
So, I think whether, in business or in life, communication is key, and good communication is key. And I think information and transparency are extremely important in governance. And so, as the chair of the Planning Commission, one of the things that we did was make it a point to have city staff circulate information on upcoming projects, ahead of time if possible. Of course, there's the standard sort of statute timing that information would be released, but I always found it's very important for residents in the community to get the important information they need to understand what's going on in their neighborhood around them. I think as a council member, one of the things that I look forward to doing is setting office hours so that I can consistently be available for my constituents within the district. And I also want to continue to push our city staff to use social media to the benefit of our residents, because that's ultimately who we're here to serve.
Thank you. The next question will go to Mr. Chang. What is your position on community policing, and how would you maintain safety in the city?
I don't know particularly what the question asker means by community policing, but I'm assuming that they mean greater interaction and maybe communication with police officers. And if that's the case, then I'm totally for that. I know that government really runs on trust, and a local government especially only works well if the people that elect that are their bosses are trustworthy or are trusting of them. And I think we can tell from a lot of the opposition to the new tax going to the general fund is that most people in Fullerton don't trust the government here, local government, to use their money wisely and spend it on things that they actually want. In terms of community policing, that's another area where there needs to be more transparency, where I think there's been a lot of strides made since previous mistakes, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi.
A Korean-American gentleman recently told me that he trained some of our officers, or some of the officers, at a fire range, and he was stopped for carrying his firearm, and he had to sit on the side of the street for 3 hours before the verification systems could confirm that he had the right to carry this. And his comment to me was, he said, "I wish there was community policing, because they would have known me, because I do train them." And this may be part of the infrastructure issue, that our verification systems are very poor, but part of it understates the fact that community policing really means that it does enhance the safety, security, and peace of mind of the community, which is where this gentleman was coming from. I don't think we can achieve either community policing or public safety with our police department being understaffed. I think it's critical that we staff it adequately. And I do think community policing is critical to addressing many of the social issues we're dealing with today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker.
I'd like to begin the response to the question by stating that for a city of our size, we actually have fewer police officers than we should. Public safety is incredibly important. As a form of public safety, community policing is ideal to me, better than police officers driving by neighborhoods in their cruisers and not being known to the community, and the community not knowing them. So recently I sat in on a meeting with the Valencia Park neighborhood of District 4, and I had the pleasure of watching an interaction via Zoom of a community that previously did not have much trust in the police department. The liaison officer from the city police was there. There was a lieutenant that was there. They spoke about basketball events that they've held, and I thought this was a beautiful effort to create more trust in this community. And I'm very pleased to see that the City Council has doubled the number of liaison officers. It's going from 1 to 2.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker.
Community policing is a very big part of the solution to understanding how we get more and more benefit out of our law enforcement. Their ability to actually understand every aspect, every corner, every nook and cranny of the city that they serve, that's very important. Yes, patrolling in an SUV at higher speed, that's helpful. It may show some visibility, but you really see the world much differently when you get out on foot, when you talk to people. And I've just seen that work so well, is when the officers have an opportunity to show the public that they're real people too, that they have concerns, and that they're going to do what they can to provide excellent service and public safety for all the residents. So I'm a big believer in getting more and more patrol out and having less hierarchy in a department.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
I would concur with all other candidates that community policing is absolutely critical. The community, however, is very different in District 1, and parts of District 1 are very different from each other. Absolutely, officers that are deployed, that do respond, must understand the issues that affect different parts of the city. Amherst Heights will not have the same dispatch types of calls as others, and I believe officers do have a good understanding of the differences in different parts of the city and the needs and the services of different parts of the city. Community policing, absolutely important. Getting out and understanding the needs of each community, absolutely important. And however, I think the officers are doing a great job as it is, being understaffed and working under the conditions that Fullerton has to offer today. But defunding of the police cannot happen.
Thank you. Mr. Jung?
Fullerton is a full-service city. That means we have our own police department. We're lucky enough to have that. We have our own fire department. I support the current changes that Police Chief Dunn has made, including community policing. The public has asked for more transparency, and the department's new public information officer has done an incredible job informing our residents. You know, everybody likes public safety and asks for it, but public safety is expensive. It comes at a cost. Our police department has more than 20 positions that are unfilled. So rather than thinking about community policing, I think the priority has to be to make sure those positions are filled, the police department is funded, and then they can serve the community properly accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlap?
Yeah, community policing is helpful and important. And I think when beat officers know the stakeholders in the community, whether those are residents or business owners, I think that we see better results. And so I would really like to see the Fullerton Police Department continue to expand and build upon some of the successes that we've seen there. Thank you.
Mr. Sergeant?
I have to say this is kind of a personal question because myself, I wore a uniform before, so I have firsthand opinion of this feeling of community policing because I trained under some of the best chiefs of police in the county. So I've got to tell you that our biggest challenge right now as an officer, I can tell you, is if you want good community policing, as a previous officer, I can tell you, you've got to retain your officers so that people know who they are. We lose so many officers, it's hard to know who's in our neighborhoods. So it's really important that we work on that first of all. That's priority. Our chiefs are doing a good job. Chief Hughes did a fantastic job with the community organization. I was involved with him. I attended the same academy. He did a great job. We need more of that, but we have to retain our officers and keep the same guys so there's not strangers in cars when they go by. People like that. That makes you feel good when you drive by and say, hey, I know that guy, you know, and it helps out. And I think that's going to be one of the resolutions that I would be proposing as a council member in District 2. Thank you.
Our next question will start with Dr. Kazi. What are your policies on providing affordable housing across the city?
Thank you for that question. There's no doubt that we have a heavy burden of a requirement from SCAG and California Housing Authority, and we have to meet a certain threshold within the next 8 years. It's 13,000 some units. Our infrastructure needs to sustain this degree of housing. I can tell you that we are struggling for both retail space. We will be struggling for retail space and housing space at the same time. We do not have enough land for both. First floor retail housing is a good option and ensures the security of our expansion of our business and retail spaces down the road. Mixed density housing is a good option so that we can provide options for our seniors that are active adults. We need safe communities, senior villages, so our elderly and young as well have the ability to benefit and enjoy their physical health without being injured. And that is missing completely in the whole conversation. There's been no focus on any ability for any of our seniors to be able to transition and move or downsize. So I think those two are critical elements in the next few discussion on housing.
Okay. Mr. Thacker?
Yeah, thank you again for the question. My preferred plan going forward would be alternative dwelling units. I think this is a great fit for Southwest Fullerton. Older residents, fixed income, they have an incentive if you cut the red tape and continue to cut the costs to add a room, add a second story, add a granny flat, put something over your garage in the back, and this could become more housing for the district and also a source of funding so that our seniors can stay in their homes. I am a fan of higher density housing, and I guess since we're on the point, I'm not in favor of expanding the number of whole home short-term rentals in the city. I think that has a negative effect on the housing stock in the city. So do partial rentals, but less so. And I guess I just want to add that I was pleasantly surprised that the Orange County Register, while they endorsed my opponent, made a note of some of my thoughts on this topic and gave me a shout out. So thanks to them, I guess.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker.
I believe that affordable housing is not really a top-down, subsidize your way out of the problem issue. It's a bottom-up issue. The basic fundamental elements of having enough income, providing enough of a living wage to allow people to buy into our local real estate markets is not even a Fullerton issue. It's all of Southern California and Northern California for that matter. So the important thing is, I think, to allow the for-profit sector, the private sector, to provide housing in different types, complete palette of different living arrangements for people. And so the idea of having kind of one-way new construction is not a good one. Second thing is, we came through a period of time where redevelopment was a real enemy of affordable housing. We had many real functional and usable older homes and other areas, hotels and everything else, that could easily have been maintained for some period of time and would be
Thank you.
eminently affordable.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
The issue of housing is a complex one. I don't think any candidate has a magic solution. Most cities in Southern California and in the state are going vertical to accommodate the RENA requirements. Some cities are looking at possible litigation as to the accuracy of the demands that the state is putting on each city. It makes sense to develop high density vertically near the train stations in certain parts of the city. It does not make sense to put a 20-story high rise in the middle of Amherst Heights or on Bastonshire. So the needs of the city are quite clear, and many developers, many companies that wish to locate in Fullerton that could increase the revenues of Fullerton are wondering where are their employees going to find affordable housing anywhere near their company.
Thank you. Mr. Jung.
We are in a major housing crisis. Our friends and neighbors are struggling silently, while our city and state have done little to make sure everyone has a home. According to Fullerton's RENA numbers, we have to build 13,000 more housing units. Now, I've told you the problem. Here's our solution. We're going to lead on housing. We're going to bring more opportunities to build more homes, like accessory dwelling units in our downtown neighborhoods. We're going to bring more opportunities to build housing for median income families in transit districts. I will encourage mixed-use development in appropriate locations with public input. And we're going to increase community outreach when planning for homes. Bottom line, we need to build more housing units, and I'll make sure that it gets done respectfully and responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlap.
You know, this is a complex problem with really a simple solution. It's simple economics, supply and demand. If you want to address the housing affordability issue, you build more housing. And I think that starts by, you know, like some of the other candidates up here have talked about, the ADU program. You know, to date in the city of Fullerton, since this legislation was enacted about 18 months ago, there have been about 89 ADUs built. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and that's, you know, that's kind of small ball, if you will. But I also think that as we look forward and we plan what, you know, the development that needs to occur in the city, we need to make sure that we also balance the open space that we all, you know, that we all know and love here. And we also need to make sure that we retain our commercial and retail space, and so that we don't just become a bedroom community, you know, because ultimately it's businesses and jobs that are going to help us bring our economy back, and we need to make sure that we account for that. Thank you.
Mr. Sargent.
Thank you. I agree 100% with my constituents when it comes to affordable housing. One of the challenges we have right now is the government's telling us how many affordable housings we have to do in a 10-year period, and that makes it kind of rough because they don't know us. They don't know what we need. They don't know our families. They don't know anything about us. They just mandate something and say you have to build this many. It was mentioned about open spaces. I think that's one of the biggest fears in our city. And the families, I've sat in the living rooms with the past month in their living rooms and discussed this. They're panicked because they came here for the rural atmosphere, and they're afraid that these surplus properties are going to turn into multi-unit condominiums, apartments, and high density is a very large fear for a lot of people. That's going to scare the public, and I think we need to talk about that and have oversight. We need to do affordable housing, but we can't take the peace and happiness and the reason why people move to Fullerton, because this is a rural city. So we have to be careful, and that's one of the things I stand for is protecting that open space. I'm not against development, but I want sensible development. I want the residents to be able to have a voice and to stop it if it's so bad that it needs to be stopped, and that's all I got to say about that.
Mr. Chang.
I'll be more direct, and I'll say I actually don't believe that the government has a good role in determining how many houses there should be in a city. They're not good at it, to be frank. People have mentioned the supply and demand issues, and there are people who are much better at recognizing where supply and where demand is in housing, and those would be developers. I am not one, but I don't believe that it benefits residents if the city council has the power to also choose who is developing what and where. Finally, I'm fairly young. None of my friends who I grew up with in Fullerton that went to Troy High School, none of them still live here because part of the reason is it's incredibly unaffordable to live here. And so I understand that is a really big issue, and it's just not an issue that government is really good at solving. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is two-part. There are two local measures on the ballot in addition to your races. Measure S, a sales tax increase, and Measure U, to ban fireworks. Do you support or oppose these two measures, and why? Mr. Thacker.
Yeah, thank you. I believe I spoke earlier. The ballot measure S will be decided the same day that our fates as candidates will be decided. This is up to the people of Fullerton. What I can tell you is that in World War II, the country banded together. This is what made America for the next 60, 70 years the #1 country on earth. I think we've lost a little bit of that. I'm personally voting for Measure S. I think the city needs it. I think every problem that everyone here has laid out begins with a lack of funding. And while no one here is the reason that we have budget deficits and unfunded pension liabilities, we can all, as Fullerton residents, be part of the solution. I'm so proud to be endorsed by Fullerton's firefighters. I've asked them, as I have for everyone that's endorsed my campaign, how can I be of service to the position? I think you're the expert. The firefighters don't believe that this measure will stop the actual problem of illegal fireworks.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker, Measure S and Measure U.
Yeah, when we talk about all the problems begin with lack of affordability, we have to look back. It was mentioned World War II. Tax levels were, except for during the war, were quite historically low compared to where they are now. We've seen ratcheted up costs in almost every area as governments scrape for more and more funds all the time. Increases in taxes, fees, rates, and charges have now created such a burden on the productive sector in our society that we need to roll that back. If anything, taxes are too high already. So I'm strongly opposed to Measure S, which would increase the city's share of the sales taxes 125% over what the current amount that goes to the city is. As for Measure U, safe and sane fireworks, to have that option really allows citizenry the opportunity to stay away from illegal fireworks. And it's a great fundraiser for so many youth groups and sports groups in the city. So I support Measure U.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
Measure S, the voters are going to decide Measure S. Some of them will decide based on what a candidate says here today. Most voters I've found are very intelligent, understand the ramifications of any tax increase. I'm against Measure S, and I will be voting no on Measure S. However, in the event that the voters decide to pass Measure S, I'm prepared to propose a 30% increase over the 50% to go to roads for 3 years, and to possibly amend or possibly modify to include a sunset clause, if that is possible, but also to make sure that the money is spent on fixing roads, the biggest concern of many, many residents in District 1. Measure U, it does not make sense to prohibit illegal fireworks. Again, it does promote youth sports, but when you do that, and what's going to happen is illegal fireworks will skyrocket, and you're going to see that every July 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Jung.
I understand the need for tax increase. Anytime government needs revenue, that is oftentimes their first fallback measure. I am opposed to Measure S. I've come out publicly against it, but voters will ultimately decide as it is on the ballot. In terms of Measure U, that is on the ballot as well in November, and I support the will of the people. I supported the measure 8 years ago to legalize safe and sane fireworks. In fact, if you look on the ballot, it's probably my name underneath it, because I understood the challenges nonprofits and school programs face in raising much-needed revenue. But I have a friend who's a combat veteran who needs to take a sedative just to get through 4th of July because of the noise pollution. So I understand why voters would be annoyed, and I've had enough. Better enforcement would help alleviate the problem of illegal fireworks, but the people will ultimately decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap.
Thanks. I'll flip the order. So I do support, the fireworks measure. I think this is a great way to help our community groups and nonprofits raise money for some of the most important organizations here in our community. And I think that allowing, the sale of safe and sane fireworks is important for us here. I do not support Measure S. Many problems with it. I've outlined my thoughts in earlier comments, and so I just think it's ill-timed, and there are many issues related to how these funds will ultimately be spent and accounted for, and it's not something that I can support.
Thank you, Mr. Sargent.
Thank you. Also, I'll start with the Measure U. I would vote against the fireworks. I understand that there's revenue to be made in that, but my biggest problem with is if you live in District 2, we have a lot of equestrian. We have horses, a lot of animals. It's very dangerous, and during that time, I have a 501c rescue for abused and neglected animals, and it's terrible, and it's still terrible to this very day. Even last week, they were doing bottle rockets, so I'm against that. The S, I make it simple. I'm not going to explain why, what would go on with the money. You need good managers first when you're going to give them more money. We don't have that yet. So let's just say I'm not for S. I'm for reestablishing management. If we're going to get a hunk of money thrown at council, we need good people and know what to do with it. Right now, we're not there.
Mr. Chang.
I'm against S. It's a regressive tax, especially during a pandemic when businesses are hurting, people are hurting. It hurts the people that need money the most. As far as the fireworks ban, I see the value in communities being able to sell fireworks and help local community projects. I think that's a really great way to use funds for something that we don't want to be selling all the time. And a black market, I think most of us have heard fireworks kind of constantly, especially during the beginning of the pandemic, going off constantly. And I already think that our police officers are overworked. We've heard how they're understaffed. And if adding more enforcement and more things on their plate is just going to make their jobs harder, and it'll make our public safety worse, especially if fireworks aren't the biggest issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi.
So I have repeatedly expressed my reservations on Measure S to increase the tax. For one, because we are in a recession time economics, the dynamics and the indicators that I'm monitoring and other business people are monitoring can be tricky. Second, the tax is too broad and not focused enough on the infrastructure. I think citizens and residents would have found themselves to be much more confident in the council if it was more heavily focused. Ultimately, it's the voters' decision, which I will respect. I have mentioned it to city leaders and have taken the pledge that if it passes, then 80 to 90% of it must and shall go to infrastructure. As far as safe and sound fireworks, it's a resource allocation issue for me. In this era of California fires and worsening of our fire season, even in this last cycle, our firefighters are mostly away from out of town fighting those fires. Having made 500 plus some calls during just July 4th week alone, I think it's a poor choice to tie up our resources. Although I do believe that we can help our Fullerton College and other Golden League kids sports leagues we can help them with grant making and fundraising.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Whitaker. There are a number of questions about homeless issues. How would you address the homeless population that is negatively impacting the quality of life for the residents of Fullerton, causing an increase in crime, drug use, and public health?
Well, I think that increasing homelessness is a byproduct of the economic challenges that we have right now. And what happens often between different levels of government are shifting responsibilities. Social services of the type that are needed, especially mental health care, have traditionally been funded through county governments, which are an arm of state government. And there is an effort afoot to force these costs onto cities, onto municipalities that have never had the wherewithal or the dedicated funds to deal with this. These are expensive propositions. But in order to help people, especially the long-term street homeless, and to try to help people get into housing the ones who are able to do that, I think largely you can't push that responsibility on the cities, as has happened with federal judge David Carter through this last couple years.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
A very complex problem with many inputs that need to be looked at very seriously. I believe law enforcement should be able to do their jobs. However, dispatch should also be wisely considered to include social services, social workers, when it's not a situation that requires purely just law enforcement. I agree with what Mr. Whitaker says regarding the state and the county putting this burden on cities, and the solution for those who can get into temporary housing and utilize that, great. The utilization rates, the devil's in the details as to how many will actually do that. But mental health issues, drug abuse issues, for those matters, Irvine does a great job at
Thank you. Mr. Jung.
Disneyland just laid off 3,500 employees. That will have an immediate impact on our economy. We need to provide dignity to those in need. According to last year's count, Fullerton had 473 people living without a home. That's the third largest in the county. 200 people died last year from being homeless in Orange County. 2 died in Fullerton last month. Many of these homeless are veterans. We talk about how much of them they're a hero. They get home, we can't do the right thing by them. Solutions are the recently built shelter near the airport, the navigation centers in Buena Park and Placentia, and the safe parking program are all positive steps forward. But our goal should always be to prevent more families and children from falling into homelessness. We cannot solve this crisis without more affordable homes. And I'm dedicated to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap.
Simply put, I think we need to help those in need, and those who want help get help. And I think we need to enforce our laws to prevent camping, loitering, and trespassing. I think there's some other resources available to us. There's county funding available, and there are county resources, social workers and social services who can help out and who can be accompanied by police officers, to address these individuals who are down on their luck and in need of help. I also think that there are some interesting public-private partnerships that are available, notably through the United Way. They've got a great program. It's United to End Homelessness. And essentially what they are doing is they are pairing, a resident or a former homeless individual who needs the social services and housing, that they can kind of wrap those together and help people get back acclimated into society, because ultimately that's what we need to do to help people get back on track.
Thank you. Mr. Sargent.
Thank you very much. This is a very complex situation, and I've been working on this, a homeless plan, for 4 years. I've been working with 4 other states on homeless programs that they have that are proven. We need to first take the people out that want to go to work and figure out the programs we can do with them to give them work on a daily basis, like they do in 3 other states, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. They have the Albuquerque. They have these programs where the homeless go out on a daily basis, work with the churches, they bus them, and it gives them money every day and they can eat. That's the first percentage we have to work. The county has to help us with the health, because they're only people that are outfitted to help with the health care. So that's very important. We understand that. But you do need to have a plan for the homeless, what we're going to do on day one when you get elected. And I do have a plan on paper, proven, from 4 governors.
Thank you. Mr. Chang.
Like others have said, it's a very complex issue, so I'm going to focus on a different part of it. Once people are homeless and in this situation, it's really difficult to fix that. And I've worked with a lot of kids and young people who have gone through issues which ends up leading for them to being in situations where they can become homeless. And I think a lot more focus and a lot more can be done sustainably by supporting people who are in vulnerable positions, who are in vulnerable situations. Maybe they're in broken homes, maybe they're immigrants, maybe there's people come from all different backgrounds that can end up being homeless. And I think the compassion for city council members to show is being able to recognize that this is not an issue that just happens to someone at a certain point in life. It's something that happens over a long period of time, and people don't just run out of their luck at a moment's notice. This is something that builds up. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi.
Thank you. First of all, I don't believe that policing is a solution to homelessness. Second, we all must realize that it took a judge to walk all the city leaders and law enforcement leaders through an entire encampment to teach them how not to criminalize homelessness. The Recuperative Center, through Elimination Foundation, is the first such step after long debates and many years of the crisis brewing that allows and offers the wraparound services much needed in terms of social and mental health and medical needs. That is a model that we have a budgetary commitment to, and we must continue and increase our budgetary commitment to that. It is also a regional approach with 13 cities from North Service Plan area that are involved, Placentia Buena Park being one of them, being 2 of them, and we need to stay committed on that course. Second, economic empowerment. We need to get these folks job skills so they can go get jobs. That's how they will be able to afford housing. But in the meantime, they will need permanent housing, and we must continue to explore permanent housing solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Thap.
1 minute just isn't enough for this obviously complex issue that covers all of North Orange County, the state, indeed the country. I guess very briefly, though, I think that the government has responsibility. This is not a problem that should be laid at the feet of all nonprofits and churches only. I think a good lens to look at it within 30 seconds is just the 4th District, where I grew up. I remember going on a field trip to the Armory, but I also remember later in life, starting about 10, 15 years ago, lines of hundreds of people who needed shelter for the night. So 4th District became what I call ground zero for North Orange County's homelessness problem. And what it takes is regional leadership. Fullerton is the largest city in North Orange County, and I think that it was a lack of leadership over the last 10 to 15 years that slowed down our progress. Navigation centers in Buena Park, Placentia, Anaheim, and Fullerton are a great first step, but our state and county leaders need to do more, and Fullerton can lead the way.
Thank you. The next question, and it will be our last question because I want to leave time for a closing statement. It's going to be a question about the budget, but I want you to know that there are many questions about parks and protecting parks, about mental health issues, and about the budget. So I'm going to combine them. Assuming that Measure S fails, the budget for the city will have a massive deficit. The public library hours have already been slashed. The Fullerton Museum Center's budget has been cut in its entirety. What would you do as a council member to restore funding, and what revenue sources would you support to make these community assets and programs work? We'll start with Mr. Cho.
I had the opportunity to sit down with the director of the Fullerton Museum, who shared many, many ideas about public and private sector cooperation and coordination. There are private market solutions in conjunction with the city council that could enhance the budget through private market means in various ways. We spoke of possibly doing more collaborative work and events and joint efforts between Fullerton's sister city in Korea, the arts community there, with the Fullerton Museum here. I thought there wasn't enough happening. They did one event a couple of years ago regarding the Korean comfort women. I think more exhibits, more efforts between the two countries, and also other private sector initiatives really should be used in increasing revenue for the city.
Thank you. Mr. Jung.
The current city council and the city manager have made significant cuts to city services already. Municipal employees have taken mandatory pay cuts. Employees have been laid off or furloughed. Cuts to services disproportionately impacts the most vulnerable in our community. The city has a newly created economic development position. I would expand on that by finding funding to create a Korean-speaking and a Spanish-speaking position to that as well. We have to be a nimble city that responds to changes and challenges quickly. Economic development will always be the long-term solution and the way out for our city from a budget standpoint. I'll work closely with responsible and experienced developers to bring successful projects to Fullerton so that revenue stays in our city. I'll eliminate costly and inefficient regulations to attract high-quality development. And as a small business owner, I'll use my experience to increase city revenue through economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlap.
So I think first we need to focus on revenue, and that's growing our tax base without raising taxes. You know, the redevelopment or the impending redevelopment of the Kimberly-Clark facility is estimated to bring about 2,000 to 3,000 jobs to Fullerton. And that's a small step, but that's a small step in the right direction. And so we need to continue to build on that and bring businesses and jobs back to Fullerton. Additionally, I would like to see, somewhere, whether it's community development, perhaps economic development, I would like to see someone fully dedicated to applying for the grant funds that are available through federal, state, and county level positions. And as far as the adjustments to operating expenses that need to be made, I think we really need to look at, outsourcing and leveraging third-party consultants so that not only can those costs be passed directly on to an applicant, but we can get things done and turned around in a timely manner so people aren't having to wait for significant periods of time to get things done. We need people to realize that Fullerton is a business-friendly city, and that's extremely important in terms of us getting back on track from an economic development perspective.
Thank you. Mr. Sargent.
Thank you very much. This is a very tough subject. As another candidate just said, it's hard to explain something in 1 minute. It's just a big subject. Bonds and the state is great to go to, but I've been working on a business platform to bring in some businesses with high tax. I have focused and directed on some businesses like car dealerships. I've talked to corporations that are willing to come into the city and open up car dealerships. I have properties I've already looked at that are coming up for sale that are on ramps, and they're very interested in them, but they will not talk to me until there's a pin on my lapel. So I can't bring those bays in, but car dealers bring the most tax base than any business will in a city if you look at the numbers. We do $286,000 a year with our dealers. Orange does $4.1 million in dealers in 5 stores. The numbers don't add up. So those are the kind of businesses we need to bring in. I've already got the people lined up. They're ready to talk to me, but you got to hire me first. They're not just going to talk to some citizen. So I'm ready to go on day one on that business plan.
Thank you. Mr. Chang.
I kind of take a different approach. I think the thing that we control as on the city council is how much we spend. And I think we need to look at pension reform. It's something that not a lot of people will bring up because it's a sore issue with a lot of people who have concentrated benefits. However, the costs, as we can see from our budget, have grown to enormous proportions and cover all of us. While bringing and increasing revenues from other businesses is very important, I think that you kind of run into incentive problems with elected officials and bringing in businesses, and when you bring in that kind of money, I think it's hard to be as transparent about that because there isn't as much oversight over those issues as there is over how much we spend. And it's very clear, you can go on the websites of the city, that the budget, almost all of it goes to pensions for 2 departments, for fire and police. And while we can't cut their services, we need to relook at how those funds are being used. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi.
My kids grew up going to the reading time here in the library or taking advantage of the arts and culture programs, and that really helped them gain their language skills back or develop their language skills to begin with. These are painful moments. These cuts are painful. They hurt now. They may hurt in the future. The key to it is ultimately a robust economic growth. This is an all hands on deck moment. I think we need to have a razor sharp focus and not put hurdles and roadblocks in bringing back retail. We need to facilitate licensure, rapidly allow or issue permits so retails come back. But there's one disadvantage we have is that we have overall much less retail space in relation to comparable cities. That's why first floor retail developments are critical ultimately to not only bring back the retail but sustain and grow more, and that's going to be the key to our future. And I just want to assure everybody this pandemic will be over soon. This economy will come back. We will come out of this, and we'll come out of this stronger. All these services will be back for the sake of all of us and our children.
Thank you. Mr. Thacker.
Some years ago, we had a conservative majority on the city council, and I guarantee that if there were legal ways to cut our pension costs, they would have done it. So I really ask my fellow candidates here to consider these. We are all handed a problem. The ink is dry. The contracts have already been enacted. We have to really consider if there was a legal solution, the conservative majority of a few years ago would have taken that action, I'm certain. The Supreme Court has ruled, California Supreme Court has ruled that pension spiking is no longer allowed. I think this is a good step in that direction. I'm sure there are other cases working their way through the courts. There's a 2-tier system already. Newer employees do not have access to the same generous benefits that the people that started 20, 30 years ago did. The question is, what if Measure S fails? And I really think all of us have to do a lot of soul searching. This is what I meant when I began my opening statement about compassion, empathy, creativity, and no cynicism.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker.
The question about museums and libraries and arts and culture, as you look at the city, those are all, if you add them all together, they're still a relatively low cost in terms of the value and in terms of those amenities being sustained and maintained in the city. So I'd be in favor of working the budget to make sure that we can keep those going. The elephant in the room, as was mentioned already, are pensions. That really is the burden that our budgets are we're buckling beneath the pressure. And the solution has been simple for many years. The 3 at 50 pension costs for public safety are breaking the bank, and we needed to shift from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. At least then, the taxpayers wouldn't be burdened by the miserable performance by CalPERS and their investments. But this is costing us very directly right now, and it's cutting into those needs that we have in the city to provide arts and culture and the full experience.
Thank you. So now we conclude the question asking portion and we go to the closing statements. Mr. Jung.
Compromise has become a dirty word in American politics these days. We're also preoccupied with background noise. We often forget we have so much more in common than we do apart. Our city isn't a one-size-fits-all. We need to build consensus and work together. We have to listen. We have to learn. Lawyers often go into politics because they understand how to write legislation. But knowing the law and understanding business or managing budgets are two different skill sets. I have the business experience necessary to do the job effectively. I will be a council member to all of Fullerton because my life story of being an immigrant in this country, growing up poor, having to work hard for the American dream, gives me great empathy. And leaders should know what it's like to walk in another person's shoes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Dunlap.
There's a lot at stake this November, and really the future of our city depends on this election. And if you want someone if you believe in good governance, transparency, and accountability, and you want someone that's not going to bring national politics to City Hall, someone that will work with city staff, elected officials, and most importantly, the community to solve the important problems and the things that are facing us today, then I would appreciate your support. As a private sector businessman with a history of success, no one will work harder for you than I will as your District 2 council member. Please remember to vote Nick Dunlap. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sargent.
Thank you very much. I would like to speak directly to my neighbors in District 2 tonight. I'm sure they're all watching, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible. I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, couldn't sleep anymore because I had to write these notes, so I'm going to get it out as fast as I can. If you want your roads fixed, then you should vote for me. If you want your open space protected, then you should vote for me. If you don't want party houses and short-term rental, Airbnb rentals, then vote for me. If you want financial security to be brought back to Fullerton, then vote for me. If you want a fully funded police and fire department, then vote for me. I have what we need for District 2. It's been my home most of my whole life, and I will fight every day. I'll work 7 days a week, and I need your vote because I know I can do this job, and you need to give me a chance. So vote for me on November 3rd. Chuck Sargent, I'm number 1 on the ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Chang.
I just want to take this time to thank everyone for being here. It's been really amazing to hear everyone's thoughts about very difficult issues, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters for hosting. My pitch to my constituents, or hopefully my constituents in the future in District 2, is that I'm running a campaign based solely on issues. The people that I've spoken with, when you message me my candidate information, all those messages go directly to me, and you're always speaking directly to me. I've received phone calls from people, and they're surprised that I'm the one that picks up. They are interested in learning about who I am and where I come from and my background. And I'm super happy that people are interested to do the research in that, because I'm not sending mailers to people and I'm not putting up signs. So it really gives me a lot of hope in democracy and for Northern Orange County and Fullerton itself. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight. Again, my name is Dr. Faisal Kazi. I'm a neurologist. I'm a business owner. I'm a founder of a nonprofit organization. I'm a community servant. I'm a husband. I'm a father. As your council member, I will work to address the most pressing issues vexing our community. That is to begin and focusing on roads and our water main as our public infrastructure, investing in our local businesses. I stand for preservation of open spaces. I'm committed to short and long-term solutions for homelessness. This is precisely why my platform is one to build, serve, and heal, and we shall do so together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for allowing us this opportunity to speak. I'm so grateful to my parents for moving to Fullerton, for my children for always asking me, why are you doing this? What do you know about this issue? Why do you want to work on this different issue? Most of all, to my wife, Pamela. I know that she's watching. Honey, I love you. Thank you so much for supporting me. This is, it's not always easy, but I can tell you that I am having fun. To the District 4 voters, you helped raise me. You were at my soccer games. Some of the Scoutmasters drove me to camping trips. I always felt so raised by this community, and I'm so looking forward to the opportunity to be our community's voice in City Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Whitaker.
My wife and I love this city, and I'm very optimistic about the future for Fullerton. Fullerton has been a great place. It's not at its best right now, but I'd like to very much work to be a part of restoring and repairing and bringing Fullerton back to its glory. It's really been my wife's home city for her entire life, and I've learned to really love all the aspects about Fullerton. There's so many good things. 1 minute doesn't allow me to get into what this city presents. So I think what you do is you use the assets that you have. We have so many smart people, so many talented people, so many willing people to try to help improve this city. We need to harness that. And good leadership at City Hall will do that. And they'll allow those people to express themselves to help provide the ideas that are going to pull us out of this. I'm someone who does that. I like to bring people together and find solutions. So thank you very much for this forum tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Cho.
We are in a nearing a post-pandemic reality where cities, states, everyone is really looking for solutions. When it gets tough, the tough are going to get going. Outside the box solutions to problems that could not be solved with the same type of thinking. As a bankruptcy attorney, I help my clients avoid bankruptcy, if at all possible. The candidates here have the unenviable task of whether it's prolonging the inevitable or shepherding a process where we get back on track, focus on increasing revenues to avert a disaster as a city. I'm a realist. However, I'm also an optimist, entrepreneur. I own my own practice, and I know how to make tough decisions. Those tough decisions are coming for the next city council.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. Normally, I would ask the audience to applaud, so please applaud for all of our candidates. I truly appreciate each of you for stepping into the public arena and putting your names on the ballot and volunteering to serve our community. I thank you for being respectful in this forum. I want to encourage everyone watching to share this with others. It's an important way to be an informed voter. To register to vote. It's not too late to register to vote. Go to ocvote.com for all of the information you need. Our Registrar of Voters for Orange County has all of the information you need. There are 3 ways to vote. Everyone will be given a mail-in ballot. You can mail that back in. You can drop it at one of the drop boxes all around the community. It doesn't have to be a local or precinct drop box, or you can vote in person with safety precautions and a mask at one of our vote centers the 11 days before the vote. You can vote conditionally if you haven't registered to vote by that deadline of October 19th. You can vote provisionally all the way up to Election Day on November 3rd. So there is no excuse. If you are eligible and qualified to vote, you can absolutely do so, and I hope that you will do so as an informed voter. So thank you very much for watching, and vote by November 3rd. Thank you.